To order. Is everybody's microphone on?
Yes.
Ready? Kyle, call the roll, please.
Miss Bame, Miss Chaput, Mr. Dribbin,
Here.
Mr. Dugan,
Here.
Miss Finney, Mr. Heil,
Here.
Miss Kirkton,
Here.
Mr. Klemp is here, and Mr. Yoakley, Mr. Eppers, and Miss Johnson.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a quorum. And the next is approval of the minutes. They've been distributed. Are there any additions or corrections?
I just had a correction on my name spelling on item number 7 on the top of the second page.
Okay, Melissa.
Got to pull those up.
Where was it, Melissa?
It's on the second page, top of the second page. It's correct on the first page.
Oh, I
Yep.
see. Okay, got it. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
I'll move.
A second. All in favor? The minutes are adopted. Public comment. Dave Buck.
Dave Buck, 124 South Elm. I can't speak for anybody else in the community, but I think this stuff is really interesting and really important. And I just want to first tell you that your open house a week ago, I thought was, I was a little skeptical going in, given that you had so much to present and so much to cover. And I was totally blown away and impressed by not only your process and your setup around the table, the fact that all of you were spread around the room and answered questions. I thought it was a terrific open house and display of information, a lot of information. And I hope you all got a lot of comments from the community beyond your community survey and other things that you've done. But I have one last comment that may be beyond your purview, and I'll qualify it by that. But this is what I was thinking about afterwards, and I'll set it up this way. Each of us individually, our success is determined by, number one, our intelligence and our knowledge and our content in our minds. That's very important. But the experts now say what's most important is your personal character and your values, that stands at the very top of the pyramid. You know, Jeannie, you know, I've gotten to know you because you helped me post community events, but I voted for you in all of your elections, not because of your rational platforms, but because of your character. Same thing with Laura Arnold, good friend of mine. She and I disagree on a lot of stuff, but I voted for her because of her character. And it's always been that way. And that's what the experts now say, it's at the very top of the list. So if that's how we assess people, a community is a group of people, is there such a thing as the character of our community in Webster Groves? And my point being is that I have only skimmed the city of Kirkwood city charter. It's online. You can read it yourselves. The format, the flow of information is pretty similar between Webster and Kirkwood. There's not a lot of difference. Although hopefully there's going to be some changes coming out of your process. But the point is, you put those two city charters down next to each other. And if the city charter is supposed to be the defining document of our city, I think that there should be more in it than just its rational content, but maybe the spirit or the character of our community is reflected. And what I mean by that is that I see a one-page cover page. This isn't a long document. It's a one-page cover page, which talks about the character of our community, our spirit, our personality, what makes us unique and different from a Kirkwood, because Webster Groves is different than Kirkwood. But if you put down the two city charters, they look pretty much the same. They're at large, we're at large, et cetera, et cetera. But we're a different city. And if this is our city charter, I think it had a one page that captured the essence of our character and our spirit here in Webster. It would do the city charter a great service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Nobody online. We'll move on to governance, and there's no items there. Next, member discussion and questions. Seeing none, we'll move on to new business and the discussion of the open house. And I think what we had about 41 people come, Dr. Peoples. Yeah. It was a lot of information, and I think we erred on the side of a lot of information, because if you come in and some people just want a brief snapshot and other people want the whole shebang. And so we gave it to them, tried to present the issue and then all the supporting information. But I was pleased with it, and I want to thank everybody for being there and helping putting this together. All of you, the staff, it was a real team effort. Anybody have any comments to make on it?
Madam Chair, I would just echo your comments. And again, appreciation to the people in the community who did come out that late afternoon, evening. There was a little bit of threat of inclement weather there for a little bit, but that all cleared up. And I thought we had good dialogue with the folks that were there. I think those of us that were staffing it from the board here had a chance to interact with many of the attendees. People were asking questions, both clarification as well as stating their view on the issues that we're dealing with. And I thought it was a good dialogue.
Anybody else?
I had fun.
You had fun? Good. We took all the sticky notes and put them in a document, and maybe Dr. Peoples, could we post this on our website too, the comments? Okay. Some people had questions about what is home rule and other questions on there about, the purpose of the preamble and what it does. And, people want wards, people hate wards, people want to stay the same. And we had split decisions on a whole lot of issues. But I think what I might try to do is go through here and the questions and try to answer some of them. Maybe, and we can post that online. There were questions about what's a stakeholder, term limits, that was posted that we did not want to consider those, but so maybe I'll just go through there at some point after today and try to answer the questions that were on there. Anything else on the open house? No. Okay. We'll move on to discussion on Article 4 and name changes. And the city manager, we've been back and forth between may serve as a department head and shall, and I think we're landing on shall, but I just wanted everybody on the same page with that. So, Neil?
I did include the language about shall as opposed to may, which would make it mandatory. I think there are advantages that we've talked about in terms of having the city manager as a director.
And then there were some contemplated name changes. And let's see, what did I do with those? One of them was the question of, and this is not in any document that, but it was a public service in lieu of police and fire, and there was one other one, I believe.
You want the comments page?
No, this was that the only one, Dr. Peoples?
Sorry, Madam Chair. That was the only name change, I believe,
Okay.
that was contemplated that's not
Okay.
captured. And I don't recall what prompted the discussion either, but in terms of moving towards a public safety umbrella that's more progressive and aligns more with what we see with police and fire departments across regionally, state, nation. So it was for consideration.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments on making that change? Is it something that we want to address now or have council consider?
So you said, just to be clear, suggesting replacing police and fire with public safety or public service?
Public safety.
Okay.
I think public safety is a good term to use. It's a little bit more modern. But I don't have strong feelings either, you know.
Madam Chair, I guess on this issue, I guess I'd caution that at least from what we've seen happen in, say, St. Louis City or other municipalities, you talk about public safety, then you're creating another layer of bureaucracy potentially that would be involved in that. And so there's some implications out of this that need to be considered.
Anyone else have a comment?
So Joe, are you saying that public safety would be an umbrella person or group over the police and fire and first responders?
Yeah, well, yes, in some municipalities, yes, that's what
Okay.
does occur. I mean, this kind of gets back to the original whole question about how much detail to provide in this Article 4 and naming the departments at all. And if we do name the departments as we are doing currently here, then the names do matter, I guess. If you want to try to avoid that, then you reconsider the question of naming departments, but then that, as city attorney has pointed out, that could potentially create some other issues.
So I think what I'm sensing is we would suggest that council take this up at some other point under their consideration.
I would be more comfortable with that.
That'd be fine.
I don't. Paul? Let's have council consider it at some point down the road.
Those kind of my philosophy that we shouldn't dictate organizational structure.
All right, well, we'll file that under council considerations. Okay, the next is discussion on community and public engagement as a charter article. And that is on our ballot. On the back 2 pages, starting at question number 24. And we kind of snuck this in as a presentation board before the CRAB board has actually decided to vote on that, just to get the public perspective on it. And at this point, it's in our ballot, on our ballot. And it's divided up into sections: the structure and support and the principles after that. And the first one is, of course, just the as an essential part of civic infrastructure.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I separated into three different parts just for the sake of ease of voting so that there was clarity in terms of what was being voted upon.
Mhm.
If this were adopted as a recommendation, it would have to be renumbered, obviously plugged as an article into the city charter. And my expectation is that they would run together. They
Mhm.
would simply be enumerated so
Okay.
that they're all included under one article.
But it's conceivable, though, that the first part, the proposed addition for the number 24 could stand alone
Yes, ma'am.
and not be so elaborate in the charter.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Madam Chair, your point of clarification, you mean number 24 could be, and 25 and 26 would drop out? Or you,
Yeah,
when you say
that-
standalone?
Yeah, no, 25 and 26 would drop out and go in the ordinances, however council decided they would want to structure this.
Madam Chair, I have a question about
Yeah.
this. So is this ballot for us or, okay, so
Yeah.
it's not for presenting to the residents?
No,
Okay,
no.
that's what I thought, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah.
I was not.
Yeah,
misconstruing.
we're just voting on, these were priorities, and what we're voting on is to send to council and,
That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure.
our level of priority 1 through 3.
Madam Chair, on the public engagement section, I do want to make a submission just for our record of correspondence that, and I shared it with the board members here a week or so ago, with the National Civic League, and asking them if if they could cite some examples of municipalities that have adopted the public engagement recommendations. And they responded that at least currently they are not aware of any such adoptions that have occurred. So I do want to just have that, make that part of the record, because we have not really discussed this in great detail. I mean, we've touched on it, and obviously we've lived it over the last several months. But just for the record, this would be a bit of a innovative action, so to speak. So I do want to make that part of our record.
Okay. Anybody else? Is Melissa gone? I know this was really important to her.
I'm still here.
Okay.
No, I don't have anything to add. I mean, I think I do agree that I still stand where I did last couple of weeks ago, that I think it's important to add it, not just mention somewhere that it's a theme, but it's also not the highest priority to me either. So,
Okay. Yeah, I found a little article, maybe the National League of Cities, that someone had written about the importance of public engagement, and not just like people that come talk to us, or like our open house, but there's a silent majority out there, I think, that we often don't hear from, and any way we can reach out to them and get input is helpful.
and I would like to add, again, we know that the current council, this is really important to them, but that doesn't mean that it will be in subsequent. So I think there is something to be said for truly adding it into the charter, as opposed to, I think the other suggestion was just mentioning it in addition to the preamble.
Could you say that again? I didn't
Yeah.
hear you fully.
I think the other suggestion was just mentioning it in the change to the preamble. And I think, again, this council is really good about public engagement, but that doesn't mean that others will be. So I just think that's an argument for adding it.
Melissa, what would you think of just the number 24 as a separate article?
Without going into the depth of the rest.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's sufficient. I mean, again, when we put this together, in our quick online meetings,
Yes.
we followed the recommendation of the model, and this, we took things out of there, right? So I do think this is very lengthy, and I think, personally, I think it would probably be higher on my priority list if it was pared down a little, because, looking at all the changes we have, definitely we've got to make priorities, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
So I feel that of the three, 24 is the weakest. It doesn't actually enforce us, the city, to do anything. If we're going to say that this is a priority, I think the 25 actually establishes some things that must be done. And my personal opinion on 26 is I think it's very wordy, but that is the one area where it compels the city to reach out to people in other languages and with, any sort of disability, whether it's hearing or vision impairments, that they need to make those considerations. So I think 24 is the weakest if we even want to care about this. And, we can obviously vote on this next week. I don't know that it pains us to have 2 additional things to vote on versus 3 or 1.
Yeah, no, we'll be voting on all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really like the inclusion of this and think it's an important thing. And I agree that it's the 26 really has the meat of it, because there's a lot of innovative ways that I have read about communities getting feedback, sticky notes on empty storefronts, asking people what they would like here, and things of that sort. So there are a lot more ways to engage the community than people have thought of traditionally. And so building that in, I think, is a really useful way for us to address the future and to make sure that, people feel included.
Madam Chair,
Mhm.
my concern with this, particularly with section 26 of this, is that we've not had any real discussion or testimony as to what all we wrought if this goes forward. I mean, what cost does the city incur? What obligations, what legal obligations obviously could be created here. And I just wanted that we need to think through this in terms of the implications here as part of the charter versus what apparently other cities are doing, which the National Civic League does refer to as part of city council, city government policies, as opposed to being in their charter, which is what it seems that many other communities are doing. They have policies with this in the public engagement sector. And obviously, I think Webster Groves over the years, and particularly in the last 2, 3, 4 years, has become much more I think thoughtful and consistent in approaching public engagement, and we're doing that in many different ways. And obviously our process here with the Charter Review Board here has tried to emulate that. And should that be part of city policy and something put together by the city staff, we're working with the city council? Does it need to be mandated and spelled out in this detail in the charter is my question.
Yeah,
I'm very supportive of the concepts here. I just wondering what we're creating and want us to make sure we're thinking this through and understanding the implications.
Melissa?
I would say absolutely we should be doing that. Because again, it's over the past couple of years improved, but that's the specific staff, that's the specific city manager and council. This prescribes that all subsequent do that as well. Again, going back to Dave Buck's comment, it's a character.
Yeah, I think that from my perspective, we're looking at the charter like a constitution, and it's the framework for our organization and how we function. It doesn't necessarily contain very elaborate details. But so let's mull this over, because next week we'll be deciding what to do with it.
Yeah, I
Okay.
too think it should be spelled out in the charter, and if you're not somewhat specific about it, you get into all this squishy stuff and people have different ideas about what it means and what's going on. So of course, I was part of this subcommittee, so I'm gonna say I like what we did, but I think I think these are pretty specific and doable things, as long as the public realizes we may not be successful, 100% of the time, but the effort needs to be there.
Okay. Neil, can we do the process of voting?
So what we tried to do, and I took, just so you know how we constructed this, I took the information that you all posted on the board, the public meeting, the public engagement session, and made each of them a question. Tried to make them yes or no's, as proposed, that you're voting either yes or no. If you enjoy the concept but don't like what's here, I would suggest that you vote no, and then indicate why, and then whatever amendments you'd want to make. If you're in favor of it, it's a simple vote for yes, or if you're against it, it's no. Again, it's only when you've got a middle ground where, yes, I agree in part, but I disagree in other parts. I then assigned a priority number, 1, 2, 3, 1 being the most urgent and 3 being the least urgent. Again, that was just a random or an arbitrary group that I picked. You guys can do whatever you want in that regard. But I think it's, that doesn't have to be voted on tonight, but somewhere along the line, you have to assign priorities. And so I thought I would include it tonight so that you could see it and think about it for your next meeting. I tried to break all of those things down, of course, by article, where articles applied, and sometimes they're highlighted in red. These are all your changes, though. These all came from your boards, okay? The only place that we did something a little bit different was, maybe we didn't, now that I'm thinking about it. On those where we're deleting, we just indicated what sections we're actually deleting. So I think that's fairly clear. The name changes and any proposed changes are of course included in red, so you can see what those things are. So when we had multiple choices, so like for instance, in compensation, what I did was, again, I took your language that you provided to the general public, and I gave you those choices with option 1 and option 2. Under the compensation options, option 2 would be a situation where you would recommend that there be a change, but leave it to council to do whatever would be there. We'd have to flesh that out a little bit, but the concept could still be that. So again, I'm using your words here, but I can see where that might not necessarily answer all the questions. Again, the same thing is true when we were talking about wards. In the event that there obviously is no change, I have a provision that allows for no change. In the event that there is a change, we talk about wards, and then we talk about hybrids. If you went to a hybrid system, we don't spell out how you decide what the wards are, but that obviously is a question that has to be answered. So you would take the information you had in the ward option above it, and you would simply apply that for the mechanics of how you would actually create those wards. So again, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's using your own words, but I'm telling you how I read them. And what we try to do is set it up so that we can do it as simply as possible on a yes or no process. So I would ask you to look at them. If there's any changes you want to make, I have the template that we will make the changes from. You can just email those to me. If there's, yes with an explanation or no with an explanation, you can include that in your record. But again, I think we ultimately have to have a clear vote. You ultimately have to decide each one of these issues, yes or no, so that council has a clear recommendation.
Sure.
Yeah.
If you could clarify this priority 1, 2, 3, and how do we look at that? And is that priority in terms of timing by the council or
I
a
think it's-
priority for us as a board or what?
I think it's priority in terms of enactment, that you think this is something that should be enacted right away, or this is something that could be enacted, but maybe later. Because ultimately, this is going to be, if all of these things were approved, it's a big, big ballot,
Mhm.
right? And there's a lot of things that are gonna be on that ballot. So you're gonna lose perhaps attention, other things that might strategically be a better approach. And again, council will ultimately have to decide this, but strategically, it might be a better approach to break it up. Again, what you're saying, what I'm suggesting you say here is that if it's a number one, we think that this should be attended to right away. If it's a number two, it should be attended to, but maybe it doesn't have to be right away. And number three, we'd like you to do it whenever you can get around to it, type thing.
Or maybe not at all.
Or maybe not. But again, that's, you guys will set that number. And you don't have to use this ranking. That was just, I wanted to give you something to work for.
And then, Madam Chair,
Mhm.
one follow-up question, actually different question, and it for you too. If I or any of the other board members were to offer an amendment to amend the proposal, and so you're saying that the process would be, we would at least initially say we're a no, but here's a concept that we want to discuss. And then are we going to do that at the next meeting, or what will the process be, Madam
Okay.
Chair?
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Go through the ballot. Vote yes or no, where you can vote yes or no. And again, if I don't like, if I like the concept, but I don't like the wording, vote no, but say that. Make it clear what you have no issues with, and you're going to winnow down this list. And then whatever is left, if you have amendments, then we treat it like any other motion. That would be, I'm moving to amend it. Here's my motion to amend it. If it's seconded, use Robert's orders in Robert's Rules of Order in this regard. If it's seconded, then vote on the amendment. And again, you go back to voting again. And then hopefully you'll come out with a clear set of recommendations with whatever you're.
Would that mean that if a yes, no, and the no's are in the minority, and I was going to offer an amendment, I'm still able to offer an amendment, or
So
when you've
if-
already had a majority of the board say,
If you,
Yes.
if you voted on it and you voted yes, you accepted it as written. That's how I would interpret it, okay? Now, again, you guys can do other things, but I would interpret it, a yes vote as approve this language as it's contained on the ballot. So if it passes by a majority, then that issue is resolved one way or another. It may not be the way you like it, but it's resolved, okay? So again, but you can still later on, because nothing here is written in stone, right? And we're kind of making up the rules as we go along. Later on, if there were other things you'd like to change, you could come back to council and say, we did make this recommendation, but I'd like to amend it, not council, but you as a board. I'd like to amend it in the following way and make your motion. If it's seconded, then you vote on it. And then you would go through the vote again.
Could we not follow Robert's rules straight away? And
Once
Ma-
it's a resolved issue, it's a resolved issue. I'm saying you could-
unless,
No.
say, if I wanted to offer an amendment, but I'm in a minority, I would, under Robert's rules, I would vote yes and ask to reconsider the motion.
no,
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 no.
you could vote no.
hold on.
Yep.
So if we made a motion, for example, to adopt the preamble, and Kyle gave it a second. After that, is there any discussion?
Yeah,
At that point, Joe could offer an amendment.
Yes,
So we could,
yes.
if people have their amendments ready, we could technically do this in one fell swoop.
But- And then at that point, when it's voted, so you would vote on then the amendment. If
Right.
the amendment gets seconded,
Right,
we'll vote on the amendment, and then you would have a yes or no vote as amended.
right. I think I would prefer to do it that way.
Okay.
Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah,
If you
Madam
have your
Chair, I had,
amendments ready.
Yeah,
I had a comment, quickly looking at this, I really liked it, so thank you. I also, this priority thing, I struggle with that a little bit, because in my mind, and maybe I'm wrong, I wouldn't vote for something unless it was a top priority for me.
Then vote one. I mean, I understand what you're saying. And again, I just put it on
That's
there.
just my view. It may be
Sure.
wrong.
But I drew this decision from information that I had on the notes and information that we had in terms of what you're giving to the public, because you were saying some things were priorities, some things were number one. And so, you know, again, but you don't have to do that. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, you know, I think, for example, the public record 5.11 that the city manager shall cause documents to be published in contemporary means of information sharing. I mean, to me, it's important that we bring our language up to modern day and actually fit what we actually do. But the city's not going to fall apart if we don't do that. So it's, maybe a 2, maybe some people think it's a 3. Some people may say, no, I want this council to address this right away. Even though it's a good amendment to our charter, it's just how weighty it is. Were there any other sections, Neil, that you want to call attention to?
Article 14, which is question number 21. Again, here is the initiative and referendum questions. Again, I would draw attention to that because I just, again, adopted your language as it was proposed or as it was just demonstrated to the public. So again, if you have any amendments, have them ready. And I'd ask you to, if there are amendments and you want me to prepare them, I'm happy to do that. And give me a contact number where I can call you just so I can make sure that I've got a clear statement with what you want to do. But we want to make sure we've got the full language there, not just, hey, I want to make a 4 or 5. Take that, paste, or cut and paste it, give it to me, and I'll, reinsert it. And with the availability of electronic posting, you can see it instantaneously. That passes. I also toyed with the idea, but I decided not to just sort of think about this because it makes Kyle's job a little bit harder, was including everybody's name under every question. So there'd be no question how you vote. Now, you're not obligated to do a roll call vote, although we can, or we can just do raise your hand who's in favor and who's against. You can do that any way you want. You just have to make sure you're recording the right number. Now, again, it's a recommendation. So we want to make sure that we have a clear record of the vote numbers. I can put the names in if you would rather do that. Again, I leave that up to you.
So it's not a requirement to have the name of who voted yes and no. Okay.
How does everyone feel about that?
I think I prefer numbers.
Numbers.
Yeah, I'm okay with either way.
Joe?
On some of the issues, I think a roll call might be appropriate for public transparency.
Paul? Eva?
Roll call's good.
Okay. Melissa?
I'm indifferent. Either way is fine.
I'm sorry,
I'm indifferent.
indifferent. Okay. Why don't you put our names down, Neil?
Okay.
Oh. And then, if ever anyone has an amendment to any of these ballot items, would you send them to Neil, please? So he can get them in the proper language. Okay, I think that covers it.
Can I ask a question of Neil?
Sure.
So someone brought it up to me at the town hall, and I don't know if I answered the question correctly or not, so I'm hoping you can help me out. These cannot be put on these must be put on as individual items when they ultimately get to the ballot.
Yes.
It was brought, so that's what I explained. And then they told me in 2020, the county charter commission submitted an entire new charter with moderate changes. Is that a function of the way that their process works versus ours, or are we comparing apples and oranges, or?
Well, you're not comparing apples and oranges. I mean, again, a charter is a charter is a charter. I actually asked that question of Eric Fye, or Fay,
Okay,
Okay.
who's really a nice man, and said, can we do it as a proposal? But you have to highlight what the changes are. So again, we're talking about 42, 46 pages, right? I frankly think that it would not pass the smell test because I think that it's just too embedded. And it requires multiple colors of ink in order to see the changes. So they just said approve a whole new charter, which was simpler to them. And in some ways, maybe that would be the better choice. But that's going to be a decision ultimately that I'm going to work through with them as to how this gets best presented. I think that it needs to be a section by section. But again, and Eric thinks so too, generally. But again, there are situations where you could say I'm submitting an entirely new chart.
Well, and I just did some searching beforehand, but in that situation, the county's charter changes were pretty minuscule. They weren't making, changes to the salaries of the members of the council or anything. So I think the answer is kind of whatever we decide we want to change, we'll make that decision.
Right. If you recall, the way the ballot language was set up there, they then had, here's what we changed.
Mhm.
So they sort of did both, but then they approved the charter as a whole. We would still have to do that. I think we'd still have to break it out because you have to underscore what you're changing. You're not saying, hey, we've made changes, find them. Again, that's the only way it would be. Why is this picture not the same as this? So again, I think that would be the bigger problem here. It would be wonderful, frankly, I think if we could do it that way. I think it'd be a whole lot less acrimonious. I think it'd be, for those people who are naysayers, who, by the way, I don't see any of them here. Again, you're in a situation where, again, it sort of makes them say what it is their issue. But that being said.
So it's an answer that we'll look at later, essentially.
Yeah.
Whatever we decide we want to change.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
got to be worked out later. And it's really going to be up to the Board of Election Commissioners. I can't say the election commissioners, so this guy. And they'll tell us the better way to do that. And, again, state statute doesn't give us a lot of direction on this, other than it has to be clear what it is you're voting. And part of the reason you do want to make sure that that is clear and that you don't want to just hide it in there is if someone were ever going to challenge it, they challenge it by saying you didn't state it as a clear question to the voters. That's how a ballot challenge occurs. And so we don't want ballot challenges. We want whatever it is to be clear and unequivocal.
Thank you.
but conceivably, we could have said, we're eliminating our current charter and here's our new charter. Okay.
And that can still be done.
Neil, I think it's good to know whether we think they're good ideas or practical. It's good to know what our options are.
But
I mean, if there is an option that it could be done all together, I'd like to know that. I'm not saying I want to do that, but it would be nice to know.
okay, I'll renew my conversation now that I have a better sense. This was early on in the process where I had this conversation.
Yeah.
And so we didn't know what we were talking about yet at that point. We didn't know what the scope of things was going to be. I have a much better sense of that. So I can ask that question now, and I'll come back to you. Hopefully I'll have an answer for you, assuming he's not out of town by next week.
Anything else on voting? We're good. Okay, send any amendments to Neil, please. Old business. We'll have to develop a timeline for our charter report. And just once we have the vote underway, we can begin to tie up those loose ends. Any questions or comments related to previous charter articles? No. Okay, so the agenda items for the next meeting is voting on the charter items. drafting our report to council. Any members that want to insert comments or into the report, you can start working on those. Next future meeting dates, we have August 22nd next week, September 11th and the 26th. I guess we'll probably be using those September meetings for working on our report. And then
We're voting at the 22nd.
22nd is the vote. And then as far as getting on the council calendar for a report,
So Madam Chair, I will work with you as soon as this board feels like they're ready. We will find a slot on council's time.
okay,
It will most likely be during a regular meeting rather than a work session.
okay, all right.
I have a question on our voting. Do people have to be present to vote? I'm not intending not to be here, but I just wondered whether people who could not come, if they could vote absentee, or if it's only people here.
Under 610-021, it's supposed to be in an open meeting, a posted meeting.
Yeah.
So I think you really need to be, now you can be here on Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah,
As long as you are here, I don't think we can send an absentee ballot in.
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
You can vote by mail.
Can we maybe put it in? Can we put it in bold, like in the subject? Because there's been a few absences. We make sure that maybe bold it in the subject line for the next meeting. Notice that this is voting, y'all.
Mhm.
Come.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
can I revisit back to, I was just proofing one thing because a member of the public during the open house was discussing this issue with me. But if we go to that Article 4, number 5, the proposed change, and Neil, at least what I'm looking at, what I developed here, the last paragraph of what I thought was on the board. And again, I'm pretty sure it was, but the wording was the additional department sentence that's there. But then 2 or more departments may be, what I have is 2 or more departments may be headed by the same person, and the city manager may head one department, or with the consent of council, more departments. Is it, now again, is that and that wording's missing here. I don't know if you,
So I took this, I cut and pasted. this
Right,
back
okay.
from the file. So
I just want,
it is.
I want to go back and
yeah, I don't have it. with
confirm,
me.
because I had a long discussion with a member of the public who raised a question about how long the city manager could be in charge of more than one department, and could that go on for a while? So,
Yeah, without that change, the sentence really doesn't make a lot of sense.
Am I right? I just read the comments from the meeting, and I, unfortunately wasn't able to be there, but that issue of the city manager heading departments, it seemed to come up a lot with people. My personal opinion, I'm a little surprised by that anyone cares one way or the other, but it seemed to come up a lot. Am I right?
Yeah, it was mentioned quite a couple times. I think that, this has been a longstanding part of the charter, and I think many people might have thought this is a drastic change, but it's not. It's been like that for decades. So I don't have the presentation boards with me. Do you? Okay.
So the final draft went on August the 3rd, and that's what I'm looking at. And that section That does have that language. I don't think that helps. So it does have additional departments and boards and commissions may be created by ordinance upon recommendation of the city manager. Two or more departments may be added, and I changed that to shall. Just for clarification, two or more departments shall be headed by the same person, and the city manager, no, that should be maybe. Maybe headed by the same person.
Yeah,
So I think the shall change that I needed to correct was in regard to one shall be the city manager. Right?
yeah, yeah.
And Joe, I will make sure that that language is in that. I cut and pasted it, but it must have been from one of the other. Sorry. Good catch.
Yeah. And the only reason that I would have noticed this is because of this extended conversation I had with a member of the public who had some concerns about this provision here, and what it meant.
Yeah, I'll change it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I think if there's anything else for the good of the whole, I think we're ready to adjourn. Is there a motion? Joe, were you gonna say something?
I will
first?
second. No.
Okay.
I will second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We're adjourned. Thank you.